Hello, and welcome to Day by Day True Crime Stories, the podcast where we explore a different crime or justice milestone from this day in history. I'm your host, Kona Gallagher, and today is July 25th. On this day in 1988, the bright future of a beloved child star was extinguished in the most heartbreaking way. Judith Barsi, just 10 years old, who would go on to be known to millions as the voice of Ducky in The Land Before Time, was murdered, along with her mother Maria, in their Los Angeles home. The person responsible was someone who should have protected them, Judith's own father. What looked like a picture-perfect life on the outside was hiding years of abuse, fear, and missed opportunities for intervention. And even now, decades later, the tragedy of Judith Barsi still raises painful questions about how and why systems meant to protect children so often fall short. Today, we're talking about the short life and tragic death of Judith Barsi and her mother, Maria. Let's get started. Judith Eva Barsi was born on June 6, 1978, in Los Angeles, California, to Hungarian immigrants Joseph and Maria Barsi. Maria had escaped Soviet-controlled Hungary after the 1956 revolution. She came to the United States chasing a dream, a safer, better life. Joseph also emigrated from Hungary, and Joseph and Maria met in California, eventually marrying and starting a family. From an early age, Judith was bright, sweet, and strikingly photogenic. When she was just 5, a talent agent spotted her at an ice skating rink. She was tiny, under 4 feet tall when she was 10 years old, and could easily pass for a much younger child. That, combined with her natural presence and ability to take direction, made her a favorite among casting agents. Between 1984 and 1988, Judith's star rose fast. She booked more than 70 national commercials, appeared on TV shows like Cheers, St. Elsewhere, and Remington Steele, and starred in movies including Jaws: The Revenge and Fatal Vision. But it was her voice work that made her truly unforgettable, especially as Ducky in The Land Before Time and as Anne-Marie in All Dogs Go to Heaven. By the time she was 10, Judith was earning about $100,000 a year, or close to $300,000 in today's dollars. That money helped her family buy a modest 3-bedroom house in West Hills, a quiet suburb in the San Fernando Valley. From the outside, their life looked like a dream come true. She was a talented young actress with proud parents. They were living the American dream. But behind closed doors, Judith's life was anything but safe. Her father, Joseph, had once been a successful plumber, but over time he lost work, drank heavily, and grew increasingly angry. As Maria became more involved in managing Judith's booming career, Joseph spiraled deeper into jealousy and resentment. Neighbors later described hearing constant arguments and crashing glass. Joseph was controlling and verbally abusive, but his violence didn't stop at words. He reportedly threatened to kill Maria and Judith more than once, and even held a knife to Judith's neck during one terrifying episode. Maria tried to protect her daughter. In 1986, she reported Joseph to the police for domestic abuse. But when no physical signs of abuse were found, the case stalled. But of course, the abuse continued. By early 1988, Judith's mental health had started to show cracks. Though she remained reliable on set, those closest to her noticed changes. She began pulling out her eyelashes and eyebrows, she developed an eating disorder, and she started plucking out her cat's whiskers. It was as if the fear that she'd kept bottled up was finally beginning to seep out. Maria took Judith to a child psychologist who quickly diagnosed her with severe emotional and psychological trauma. CPS was contacted. The therapist warned that they needed to leave Joseph immediately. And Maria said that she was planning to do just that. She'd found an apartment and was preparing to move. But fear is a powerful thing. Maria worried that Joseph would follow through on his threat if she tried to leave. And she was also afraid of losing the home that Judith had earned for them. So she stayed. And that decision would turn out to be fatal. July 25th, 1988 was a quiet summer morning in West Hills, and that was the day that everything changed. Inside their home on McHale Street, 10-year-old Judith was likely doing what any kid might do. Maybe watching cartoons, maybe rehearsing lines. She was getting ready to fly to Atlanta for a voice recording session for All Dogs Go to Heaven, which was another step in her blossoming career. Maria was busy packing. She always handled the details, the flights, scripts, auditions. She built her life around supporting her daughter. But in another part of the house, Joseph Barsi was stewing. He was jealous, angry, and armed. At some point that morning, he grabbed a .32 caliber pistol. He walked down the hall, entered the kitchen, and without warning, shot Judith in the head. Maria, hearing the gunshot, rushed toward her daughter. Joseph shot her too, multiple times. Then he did something even more disturbing. Instead of fleeing or calling 911, he calmly went to the garage, retrieved gasoline, and poured it over their bodies. For the next 2 days, he stayed inside the house, alone with what he had done. On the morning of July 27th, he walked into the garage and took his own life with the same gun. The murder sent shockwaves throughout Los Angeles and especially through Hollywood. Judith was more than just a young talent. She was a child with her whole life ahead of her. And the tragedy left people asking, how had this happened? How had no one stopped it? News of Judith's death spread fast, and it left a deep and painful mark. Her funeral came just days later. Friends, family, fans, and fellow actors showed up in disbelief. At Forest Lawn Memorial Park, Judith was laid to rest next to her mother. Her headstone reads, "Yep, yep, yep," a line from her character Ducky in The Land Before Time that had captured so many hearts. Actress Tracy Gold, who had worked with Judith, recited a poem at the funeral. But the pain around this wasn't just personal, it was systemic. People began asking how a child with visible signs of trauma and a known history of domestic abuse could fall through the cracks like that. LA's Child Protective Services came under intense scrutiny. They had been warned, and still they had closed the case. The Barsi tragedy became a lightning rod for reform. Advocates and lawmakers pushed for stronger protections, especially for children dealing with emotional or psychological abuse. Professionals were trained to recognize warning signs beyond bruises or broken bones. And cases like Judith's were used in trainings as a heartbreaking example of what happens when we don't act. But Judith's voice has lived on. All Dogs Go to Heaven was released in 1989 and was dedicated to her memory. Her performance as Anne Marie is tender and moving, and was made even more haunting by one line, "Will I ever see my mom and dad again?" It's a moment that brings many viewers to tears. In the years since, Judith Barsi has become more than a child star who was lost too soon. She's become a symbol. She's a reminder that behind every smile, there might be a story that we can't see. That children can be in danger even when they're in the spotlight. And that protecting them means listening, really listening, when they cry out for help, even in the smallest ways. Thank you for joining me on today's episode of Day by Day True Crime Stories. If you found Judith's story compelling, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. It'll help us grow. And be sure to join me again tomorrow as we explore another significant event in true crime history. Until then, stay safe and remember that behind every headline is a life worth remembering. Day by Day True Crime Stories is a Little Monster production.
Hey, you can do it!